Hello, History 132. We're in our final week of the semester. Uh, I'm going to talk to you about the post World War II era up into the current. But a little housekeeping details. Hopefully, you have taken test one and test two, and I'm going to schedule your final exam next Friday, November the 20th. You're going to have the whole weekend. I keep it up from Friday to Monday of the next week. So November the 20th through the 23rd. I will upload you your study guide and this lecture to help you prepare. Uh, Hopefully, you having no problems with your research papers. It will count for 100 points. So you get a 400 points and we'll divide it by 4, and that'll be your average for the semester. Even though I haven't met many of you, interview, I've enjoyed talking to you online. But let's get to work here. I have your study guide in front of you. We talked about World War One, which started in the Balkans in 1914, lasted all the way up till yesterday, November the 19th. Armistice Day, November 11th, 1919. World War One ends. There's an effort to form the League of Nations. It was a failure by Woodrow Wilson. But a lot of other things are going on in this next 10 years, including the Women's Suffrage Clause, the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote, white women's. Black women's would not get it until 1965. Also, Prohibition was enacted, which gave rise to the modern mafia. It was repealed. The amendment was repealed in 1933 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The 1920s is called the Roaring Twenties. Good time rose, bathtub gins, flappers, etc. We also see the appearance for the radio for the first time, which entertained the masses with soap operas and, of course, with propaganda. Uh, but in 1929, the stock market collapsed and the world entered into a depression. No jobs, no money, hard times. Uh, and this led to the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who would serve 4 terms as president. He dies in office in 1944 in Warm Springs, Georgia. But Roosevelt, to get us out of the Depression, implemented what we call the New Deal. Now, you've seen and heard the word socialism bandied about during the election year. But Roosevelt implemented socialist programs like Social Security, Old Age Pension, Work Project Administration, WPA, the Conservation Corps, basically putting people back to work. Now in Europe, there's something opposite going on. The Germans had been defeated in World War One and forced to pay reparation. A leader there was elected. He didn't seize power, named Adolf Hitler, and formed Nazism and began to rebuild the military might of the Germans. They were the first country to get out of the Depression. To the south in Italy was another fascist by the name of Benito Mussolini. He created the fascist state in Italy. So you can see where we're going with this. World War One was total war and fascism. With the start of World War II in 1939 by the Germans, and of course the Italian invading of Ethiopia, the world is back at war, a war never seen before. Um, we got involved on December the 7th, 1941, when the Japanese, who was allied with the Germans and the Italians, attacked our fleet at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. So we fought the war in the Pacific and the war in Europe. We defeat the Germans along with the British Russians mainly. The French, what can we say? That war ended in April 1945, but the war in the Pacific goes all the way until August of 1945, and that war ends when we dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese, the bombs at Nagasaki and Hiroshima. This launched the U.S. into a world power, and so now we are the most powerful nation on earth thanks to the splitting of the atoms and the new physics that comes out of destruction of the atom. Uh, but the whole issue now was to rebuild Europe, and of course, this country led the way. Now, by the way, Roosevelt dies before he okays the dropping of the 2 atomic bomb. He is succeeded by Vice President Harry Truman, who gave permission to drop the bombs. Joseph Stalin was the leader of the Russians. Oh, and the Chinese was led by a man named Mao Zedong. He's a communist, and so is Stalin. So you hold on to that point, we'll come back to it. But the U.S. instituted what we call the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe after World War II. We also helped to rebuild Japan, and they became allies of ours. Now, immediately after the Second World War, the nations did come together and form the United Nations. And one of the first acts that they did during this particular time was to create or recreate the nation state of Israel. If you recall, during World War II, it is estimated from 5 to 6 million Jews are sent to the death chambers by the Germans in concentration camps. The world felt guilty for allowing this to happen. So in 1947, the modern state of Israel was established. And of course, we've had problems since that. We'll talk more about that because we basically took land from a group of people who had been living there for thousands of years and said, nah, this belongs to the Jews. That's the conflict. But the United Nations was a key to this action. Also, the Russians and the U.S. began to launch a space program. The Russians launched the first satellite to orbit the world, and it was called the Sputnik. We did it second with John Glenn. We were the second nation to orbit the Earth. And of course, you know about the space program. I hope you do. We landed on the moon in 1969. Now, this era also led to the establishment of the modern day civil rights movement and led to the toppling of colonialism, particularly in Africa and Asia. Nation states now are being stood up. Nigeria, Chad, Angola, Egypt, India received their independence. But now the world is divided into 2 spheres: the Russian or the communist bloc and the U.S. and the Western bloc. The West and the U.S. came up with a policy called containment to contain the Russians, to prevent their advancement further into Western Europe, led to the erection of the Berlin Wall, which came down, I believe, in 1988, supposedly ending the Cold War. So now we are fighting Cold Wars instead of hot wars, even though we get involved in some hot spot. In 1950 to 53, Korea still divided, North and South Korea, because of an armistice. Later, we would become involved in Vietnam, Southeast Asia. We lost the war without ever losing a battle. How do you do that? You have to figure that one out. The Marshall Plan was successful, and a whole new global economy was established. But during this Cold War between 1945 and 1989, we had the following effects upon America. It promoted civil rights, it created a consumer society, and it led to wars in Korea and Vietnam. With the end of the Cold War, And back to this issue over Israel and Arabs and Palestinians. This led to, in 2001, the attack on the World Trade Center, 9/11. And of course, this further led us into war in Iraq and in Afghanistan. We still have troops there. So that's been over 20 years. Al Qaeda attacked us on September 11th, 2001. Of course, we have elected monumental presidents. A particular one that stand out is Barack Hussein Obama, the first African American president, and hopefully we will have our first black female vice president next year. So things are changing, and of course there's a counter backlash to the Obama, which led to the election of Donald Trump. So I'm gonna stop this right here. I'm gonna load your study guide and the test. You have all next weekend to complete the test. If you are a graduate, please contact me immediately so I can submit your grade and get you out of here on time. If you have any questions on your research paper, let me know. Or you have any questions on this upcoming test. I've enjoyed you. I hope you learned something. I know it's unusual time we're living in, but we must adapt and go on. Be blessed and have a good end of the semester. Caver out.